Okay, I think we're live. So people in the comments are going to tell us when we are.
Any comments? Right, we're live. Okay, so welcome to Merge PHP tonight. Thanks for joining us. We are pretty excited to have you. So, we have several meetups here, so I'll walk through them one at a time. First off, Atlanta PHP. Atlanta PHP was founded in 04. It is the closest meetup to me, even though I have only been once or twice. And really great people there. Chris runs that. There is a JetBrains license raffle. And so you get 1 year license of any of their tools. And you can also add it to your current subscription if you want. So the first person to email Chris Spruck at chris@atlantaphp.org wins this. I'll send off your emails now. We also have Boston PHP. Boston was founded in 2002. They have about 3,800 members. That's led by Bobby Cahill. And then Gene Babin also runs a virtual self-study group. They had 5 virtual self-studies planned for 2023. Next up, we have Austin PHP, also founded in 2002. They have 2,100 members. You can see more about them at their Slack and Discord group on their GitHub. They're also very closely involved with the Longhorn PHP conference, which is my personal favorite conference. They're led by Logan and Ian Littman. We also have Seattle PHP. They were founded in 03, just a little late. And they have about 1,500 members. And they're ran by our own Tim Bond, who you will see in just a little bit. No spoilers. Then we have PHP Vancouver, founded in 2013 with 1,100 members. They're led by James Doyle and Sean Maggs. You can see them on Meetup. And then the fabulous PHP Vegas user group with over 1,000 members, founded in 04. They're led by Josh Copeland and sponsored by Remote Dev Force. Then the Kansas City PHP user group, founded a long time ago in a galaxy far away. They have 2 events a month, a presentation and a coffee shop. They're led by Dan Holmes, John Carey, and Eric Poe. Utah PHP, which was started in 03. You can read more about them on Meetup. They have over 600 members. They're led by Mark. Oh man, I'm going to just butcher your name. They're led by Mark and Derek. Let's do that. And then we have San Diego PHP, one of our newer meetups to join here. They are the only user group with a surfboard for a logo. You can learn more about them on their website. They're led by John Cogden and Eric Van Johnson. And then PHPDX was founded in 2013. They have about 1,100 members. They also are involved with the Cascadia PHP conference, so check that out. They're led by Elena Holligan. And fun fact, I helped organize this meetup for like a year, many years ago, back when I lived in Portland. Great meetup, great people. Let's call out a few upcoming conferences and events in the PHP community. I'm not going to read them all off here. You can read the list yourself. I will say we want to call out PHP Tech in Chicago. Yeah, check it out. And then come check us out on the socials. We are everywhere you could want to be. Hope to see you around. We're on Twitter or X or whatever you call it nowadays. We're on Mastodon and we're on YouTube. And if you have a talk idea, we would love to hear it. This can be a great way to practice a talk, to get introduced to different meetups, to kind of work your way into talking. It can be a good way to get more publicity for a talk you're giving. It can be a good way just to meet more engineers, more developers, get your name out there more, get more involved in the PHP community. We run this to help the meetups, to help the PHP communities across the country. And part of that is having great speakers giving fun talks. Tonight, we are going to hear about PHP 8.3 from our very own Tim Bond. Tim is a senior full stack PHP developer. He's been working with PHP for over 19 years. He's seen PHP grow from a hodgepodge roots to a modern development language. When he's not in front of the computer, you'll probably find him hiking or playing bike tag around Seattle, or putting together a new Lego set on one of the very rare rainy days there. So we are very lucky to have Tim tonight. Thanks for joining us, and really interested in hearing more about PHP 8.3. This is my wild applause clap for Tim.
All right, can everyone see the screen and slides now? My window's full screen, so give me an audible yes or no.
I see you, Tim, but I do not see your slides.
Okay, give me just a second then. We rehearsed this and it worked great, and now when I click share screen, nothing happens. I will be right back.
To kill time, Logan will give us his best stand-up that he's been practicing just for this moment.
I don't know about that. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Merge PHP November. Let's see. I think Tim will get it figured out here. He's back on the stage there. Okay. Yeah, we're good now. All right. Now let's add Tim back. Tim, can you hear us?
I can hear you fine.
Sweet.
And the slides are up now?
Yep, we got them.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben, for the introductions, and thank you, Logan, for getting everything working. So let's go ahead and get started. So let's take a look at where we are in the calendar right now. Just today, release candidate number 6 for PHP 8.3 has come out. Back in June is when the initial alpha release came out. On July 18th is when they decided no more feature phases. Throughout the betas and the release candidates, various volunteers came together to test various features. Assuming that we do not find any more bugs between now and November 23rd, the actual available release for PHP 8.3 will happen on the 23rd. So if you're wondering what is new in this version of PHP, not a lot. But I've gone ahead and organized the features that we have in here roughly in the order from most interesting to least interesting as I see fit. So getting started, let's take a look at a new feature, typed class constants. So in versions of PHP less than 8.3, you could, if you really wanted to, implement an inheritance of constant that changes the data types depending on what type or class it was in. This was probably not a good idea, and if you had tried to declare a constant with a specific type, like you would see a syntax error. So now in 8.3, you can actually the type on that. And if we can move to the next slide. There we go. We note that now if we are constants, you can put a type on there. So relatively small change, but has big effects. And honestly, it feels more natural because when you're deploying on constant class properties, you typically put the type on there, so it just makes more sense to be able to have types on the
Hey,
console as
Tim,
well.
sorry to interrupt you here, but we're getting some audio issues from you. Sounds a bit robotic. I don't know if it could be your internet connection. Maybe kill your video.
Yeah,
Or
your
go
video
ahead
is
and
cutting
give us
out
a
too.
try.
Let's give that a
Yeah,
shot.
you're coming in and out pretty bad on the audio. Think we might have lost him completely.
All right, we're any better now?
Yep, that's better.
Awesome. Let's see if we can get screen sharing working again. I don't know why my computer is so laggy today.
Luckily, Logan prepared a second to stand up just in case.
Okay, slides visible.
They're still loading, and I think your audio is cutting out again. Say a test sentence. Yep, your audio is definitely cutting out. You could try sending me the slides, and I can try sharing them while you talk.
Let's give that a shot.
Sorry, y'all. Technical difficulties. We'll get it figured out.
I'm back.
Welcome.
Yep. So let's try sharing the slides and then see how that goes. I'm not sure. I was trying to think like how if he could call us on a cell phone or something, how would we get the audio in to the live stream?
I don't know if that's an option. All
We'll
right,
just
you
hope
just send me the slides. Let me share this.
Okay. Hopefully, just the audio by itself is fine. That's you sharing. Okay, so I'm gonna add Tim back. Tim, you're back.
Have you heard?
You want to try
Say something else, Tim?
Yep.
Something else.
That might work. It's okay so far.
Is the roboticness better this time?
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Awesome. Okay, let's go ahead and continue then.
All right.
So with the typed class constants, we, of course, now enforce that the type is going to be the same even on classes that inherit from the parent class. If you try and change the type on it, like we do in this example, changing the version constant from a float to a string, you will get a fatal error that is a type error at runtime. Next, please.
Okay, I'm trying to get this to advance. How does the slides.com thing work? Am I doing something wrong? I'm using
Should just
arrow
be
keys.
left and right arrow keys.
Yeah, it's not working. Hold on. No, it does not work. Can you send it to me in another format?
That's what I was using with that same URL. Try page up or page down.
Yeah, I tried it. Let me try. Does not work for me. Logan, can you try it?
Yeah. Where's the link? Is it?
It's in the Slack.
Well, we wanted to make sure everyone got their money's worth tonight and got to see as
Yeah.
many of the organizers as possible.
Right. Yeah. How many organizers does it take to screw in a presentation? Okay. This one.
Okay, Ian says the presentation is locked for people who aren't the presenter.
Ah.
And Eric asked if the presentation was written in PHP.
Can confirm I cannot do the up and down.
That's a good question. Can you click, Tim, while we share? Is it linked? Yes,
Yeah.
that is moving. All right, let's
Okay.
do that.
All right. So are you going to share again?
Yep. All right, now try to advance it, Tim.
I clicked and nothing.
Doesn't do it while we share. That's great.
Well, how about in the meantime, we'll talk about the fact that the date time methods now throw more appropriate exceptions. So previously, if you were passing some invalid values to the datetime extension, you would just get a generic exception thrown. Now, depending on what type of problem it is, you're going to see a very specific type of exception. So, for example, constructing a new date time zone, if you pass in a string that isn't recognized, you're going to get a date invalid time zone exception instead of just a plain exception. The errors have more to do with problems in your code, such as like extending one of the datetime objects and not calling the constructor. Your thing would not be particularly, the code is not well written, and so it would throw that instead. So just give an example here. This is if you have like an embedded function inside a constructor call. For example, maybe that risky function throws some sort of exception on there. You would be then catching either the exception that the date interval might throw or that function might throw. And so you might want to handle those different exceptions differently. So now in PHP 8.3, we look at the next slide.
All right. Ian says that if you open the presenter view on another device, you'll be able to advance things, Tim.
Let me see if I can do that. Can you send me that link?
Sure. Oh, I don't know what the presenter link is. It's the one I have.
Got it.
That worked. Something moved.
Awesome. So now with PHP 8.3, we can now catch our different exceptions differently depending on where they came from. So for example, if this risky function then throws a risky exception, we can catch that separately from the malformed interval that risky function might return. So always nice to have more specific exceptions. Next, we'll talk about the fact that the PHP command line linter supports linting multiple files at once. So the command line linter has been around for many, many versions, but in previous versions, if you were to give it multiple file names on the command line, it would only lint the first one and it would ignore the rest of the input. Starting in 8.3, you can pass in multiple of them and it will actually lint multiple things in there. I know several projects on their continuous integration server will run the PHP linter on every single file, and this will allow you to just pass the list of all the file names in at once instead of having to loop through and call the PHP binary on each individual one. So for larger projects, I would say that could probably speed up your CI by several seconds to possibly even minutes saved on there. So always a good thing. Next, there is a new override attribute. So let's take an example of where we have this abstract class called parent, and it has this function called getNumber, which returns an integer. In our application code, we might want to extend that class for some particular reason, and we want to override that particular function. So in order to convey our intent, we will, starting in 8.3, we can add this override attribute to there to let the PHP compiler know that, yes, we are intending to override this particular function that existed in the parent class. Now, let's say that that parent class gets modified later, and it no longer has a function called getNumber, and we instead change that to something like generateNumber. This means that when we run our application, we're going to get a fatal error saying that we use the override attribute on this function, but we're not actually overriding anything in that class. So that way, this is particularly useful for library code that you might be extending. Maybe the library maintainer then changes the way that that class works, and that if you're no longer overriding that, you're going to get some unexpected behavior. So pretty nifty little attribute there. If nothing changes in the parent class, that override attribute effectively does nothing. Next, we have a new function called mb_stir_pad. This function works exactly the same as the existing stirpad function in PHP. It takes the exact same parameters in the exact same order. The only difference is that it is now multi-byte aware. In addition, not shown here, the MB stirpad has a last parameter after the stirpad constant that can optionally accept the encoding if you know what your thing is going to be in advance. So if we take a look at using the existing stirpad function with a multi-byte string there, we see we have two triangles pointing to the right. Now those are 3 bytes each, and so if we tell the stirpad function that we want a string of length 6 and to pad it with these other emojis, we're actually just going to get the same string back in the first place, because each of those is 3 bytes and it's counting up to 6, and it determines that it does not need to add any padding to there. But if we use a function that is multi-byte aware, of course, it will add the appropriate emojis to that, using each character as one character instead of the number of bytes per character. So this was kind of an anomaly in all the multi-byte aware functions in PHP. This was one of the few string functions that didn't already exist. And guess what? Now it does. We have a new randomizer class, which provides some slightly new implementation to some of these existing functions that were inside PHP. I think one of my favorites in here is to get bytes from string. So for example, if you need to generate a random coupon code, you can pass in a string that has all the various characters that are valid for your coupon codes and the length, and you will just, boom, get a string in there. I believe that some of the actual randomized implementations of some of the functions under the hood actually did change. If you're really curious about how the randomizer functions work and why absolute randomness is important, I know that Sammy K. Powers has done a talk in the past about how he added the C-Spring randomizer functions to PHP, and that would be a great one to check out. Next is change into the way PHP handles negative indexes. So if we declare an array, and then we separately set a value by its index, and then we push onto the array, PHP is then going to treat that next push value as the array index starting at 0. But in 8.3, it behaves in a slightly more predictable way, in that it goes to the next allowable value in the array, which is going to be a -4 instead of 0. So this is one of those tiny things that may be lurking in your code base that's kind of hard to check, but as long as you're not using negative indexes, probably not something you would need to worry about. Next is a stack overflow detection. This doesn't mean that PHP can detect that you copied code off everyone's favorite website, but instead can determine when the call stack exceeds a certain amount of size. So if you have a function that calls a function, that means that you're now 2 stacks deep, or 2 levels deep in the call stack of the application. And if you exceed a certain amount, I don't remember what the default is for PHP, it will hard fail. This can also happen, I believe in some cases it can cause a seg fault. And so there are now 2 new INI directives inside PHP, the php.ini file that you can set, and you can set the maximum allowable stack size and the reserve stack size. So if you exceed the difference, PHP is going to go ahead and throw an error, which you could then gracefully catch instead of having the process itself die and return the proper, maybe not the proper response, but you can at least gracefully handle that error instead of having the actual PHP runtime implode on itself. Next, we have several changes to the range function. I know there's a lot of text on here, but really this is just trying to make things a little bit more sane if you're passing it non-integer values. So the range function is a function where you would pass in two different parameters and it will return an array having all of those values in it. So I know if you call something like range 1, 3, that will return an array, and the array's values will be 1, 2, 3. So you can imagine if you put something in there with strings and integers combined, obviously that's going to give you some unpredictable behavior. So now we're going to see some type errors and value errors thrown if you have some invalid values, and there's actually some warnings that are going to be emitted from the function if you're trying to generate something possibly like mixed integers and strings. We have a new function called JSON_validate. This is very similar to how JSON decode works, except it does not return anything except for a Boolean true or false, declaring whether or not the JSON is valid or invalid. So obviously a JSON of a single opening curly brace and nothing else is going to be invalid JSON. And so if we try to then validate that, we could handle that more gracefully instead of having to go through and take the time and allocate all the memory to the various parts of the decoded JSON, because usually things are not going to be just a single byte character in there. So this is going to be a little bit faster than calling JSON decode on its own, just because we don't have to allocate anything into memory. It's only going to be returning us a single Boolean on there. The signature to this looks very similar to JSON decode, except there's only one flag that it will take, and that flag is JSON invalid UTF-8 ignore. This function will not throw because that flag for JSON throw on error is not available here, because this one will return just a single Boolean. Next, we have a fallback value support for PHP.ini environment variables. So this is a methodology that I've never actually seen myself in a PHP.ini file, but you can use the PHP string interpolation syntax to pull in environment variables inside your PHP.ini. So in this case, if we were to set a value, an environment variable value called xdebug client host, that value is actually going to be pulled into the PHP.ini file. Now, if that environment variable was not set, it's just going to return empty string, and the client host value for xdebug will be empty string. So starting in PHP 8.3, we can set this fallback value. In this case, we're using localhost as a default example, so that if that environment variable is not set, it's just going to go ahead and pull in this hard-coded string here. Next, we have some new syntactic sugar in a way to pull in class constants dynamically. So if you need to refer to a particular constant based on the value of some string in an array, you now have this syntax here. It also works fine for enums, so you can pull in the actual value of an enum too. If you've ever used the built-in PHP server, the value of the version that you're running on is stored in the $server superglobal under the server software key. And back before, it was just PHP, the version number, and then development server. But it turns out there's actually an RFC that defines how this is supposed to be formatted. So I thought that was interesting. I had no idea there would be an RFC for that, but now the PHP server is compliant with that. Of course, the PHP server is really only meant for local development and definitely not for deployment. So this should not affect anyone in there using this in production. If you do want to check to see if this is running on like the PHP server or through Nginx or Apache or some other method, comparing against this string is not what you want to do. There is a PHP constant that's defined called PHP_SAPI or server API that will define how the server is running, and that would be the one you would want to check against. Now in PHP 5.3, we have anonymous read-only classes. We've had anonymous classes for several versions, but now they can also be read-only. So in this example, we return this anonymous class here, and we declare that the entire class is read-only. So that means that all of the properties on the class can only be defined at construction. So if we then tried to change one of those properties on this later, we would then get a fatal error because the read-only property cannot be modified. Next, we have invariant constant visibility. This was something that I think only existed since a few later versions of PHP. It was somewhat of a bug, and if you didn't catch it, you could then create some rather interesting code. So if your interface declares a constant that's public, you cannot override it as private. So this bug has been fixed. You can't do that anymore. Probably not something you should have been doing anyways. So I think the amount of effects this would have is very low. We also have a change to arbitrary static variable initializers. Now in PHP, you can declare a static variable inside a function, and that function and that variable is going to be the same regardless of the number of times you call that function. But previously, if you were to try and define that static variable as the result of an expression, you would not be allowed to. So that static variable would have to be defined as a scalar value, like a 1 or a number or a string or something in there. Now you can use some sort of expression to determine its value. So there's been some changes to traits and static properties. I don't have an example for this one, so I'll just read directly from the manual, saying that uses of traits with static properties will now redeclare the static properties inherited from the parent class. This will create a separate static property storage for the current class. This is analogous to adding the static property to the class directly without traits. Personally, I haven't found a very good use for traits, so I don't use these, and I don't know exactly how this would affect your code base. But if you do use static properties on traits, that is something to definitely look into when you go and upgrade your code. PHP has a built-in function called gc_status, which returns some information about what the garbage collector is doing. There are 4 keys that it currently returns, and now it returns another 8 more. Telling you about what it is doing internally. Probably not something you would need in some production code, but if you are debugging some memory issues with a script, this can give you a good idea of what's going on and possibly help you free some variables that are still using memory. There are several changes to the assert methods inside PHP. Some of these are going to emit some e-deprecated notices when you call them. So an assert function in PHP allows you to pass in 2 variables, and the PHP runtime will determine if they are equal. And depending on the value of a php.ini setting, it may handle things differently. It could emit a warning. It could actually kill the script, call an exception, or call a callback, or throw an exception. Because these are so unpredictable depending on what type of system you are deploying to, using the assert methods are generally considered a bad practice for production code, and possibly even your test code, because there's no guarantee how the test run is going to run things. So if you're using assert, try not to. And if you're using the assert options or setting assert active in the php.ini, you'll want to get off of that, because that will be removed in a future version of PHP. Next, we have a couple changes to the array product and array sum functions. And these specifically have to do with array elements that are non-numeric or cannot be casted to a number based on the class in there. So previously, they would just kind of silently be skipped over, but now we're going to emit an e-warning. Next, we have some progress towards making the ++ and the -- operators slightly more sane. So if you try and call ++ or -- on a null, Boolean object, etc., you're going to get an e-warning. And because of this, we also have 2 new functions called stir increment and stir decrement. So if we pass in a string, it's going to go ahead and give us the next highest value on that. There are many, many changes to how this is handled on various different edge cases. So if this is something that you might use a lot, please check out the RFC. There are many examples on there. And the last things that are too small to need their own slides. The unserialized function, if there is an error decoding that, it will be an E warning instead of an E notice. Read-only properties on objects can actually be reinitialized when you call the clone method. So when you have an object that is already instantiated with some projects on it, if you then call clone on that, the actual language construct clone, which then calls the __ clone method on that object if it exists, you can actually change read-only properties at that time. So this was something that was considered a missing implementation in the initial read-only classes. There were several changes to how read-only properties were going to be affected, and this is the only one that made it into 8.3. We have a new function called class_alias. This will take two class names and create an alias of that class. This is different than extending the class through inheritance because the two classes are considered equal. One would not inherit on the other. This will often be used by framework authors who are trying to maintain backwards compatibility for a version or two. Maybe they've refactored one of their classes and it now has a new name. They'll be able to create an alias of that old name and still have it point to the new one, but it's not going to preserve the old functionality. The two classes work exactly the same. There's a new function called stream context set options. So this works exactly the same as the existing function called stream context set option, but that method, the existing method with no S on the end, will accept either a string or an array for the options that you're setting on there. So this new function called options will only accept an array for the options that you're passing to modify that stream, which means that at some point in the future, the stream context set option function will probably no longer accept the array because this function will have it. That'll make the functions a little bit easier to use because you don't have to worry about whether or not it takes a string or an array. You'll have one method for each. The SQLite 3 extension now will throw exceptions instead of returning Boolean false. This is basically the same as what the MySquilly exception did in PHP 8.1. If you create a closure from a magic method, you can now use named arguments inside that closure. So on the PHP manual, there is a document about how to migrate from 8.2 to 8.3. This is a good thing to look at and see if maybe any of your code might be affected in there. Take a look at some of the new classes and new functions and make sure that that doesn't interfere with any of the functions or classes or constants that you may have defined globally in your application. So you might be thinking, there's not a whole lot of new features in this. Should we actually bother upgrading? The answer is yes. So why do we say that? A couple months ago, there was a CVE for PHP versions, too many to discuss in here, but this affects several versions of 8.x and 7.4. So an attacker with a specifically crafted XML string, such as the one we see here, could actually get it to execute arbitrary code on your device. So in this case, this refers to a file on an external server, and the PHP DOM document processor, when it loads the XML, will actually evaluate that as code. And then in this case, that particular code instructs the parser to generate the string woot. And inside of that, it's going to base64 encode the contents of etc password on that system. So that could either be echoed out to the user or possibly posted on there to a third-party server, depending on how the actual application was written. So this is only patched in the currently supported versions of PHP. So the current PHP release cycle means that we get a new release every year, and each release lives for 3 years. For the first 2 years after its release, we're getting bug fixes only, and then the year after that, it'll be security fixes only. So even if there are bugs found in that version of PHP in 2.5 years after it's released, that's not going to be fixed in that version since we're limited only to security versions. Visualized as a calendar, that looks kind of like this. And so we can see that right now, 8.0 only is getting security fixes for another 15 days. And after that, it will not be maintained at any point whatsoever. So we might be thinking that this is kind of a pain in the butt to have to, kind of be upgrading every year to make sure that we're not going to be vulnerable to any of those security issues. And that's just kind of the way it is. The good news is that the 8.3 upgrade should be fairly painless for most code bases. There's not a whole ton of like big gotchas in there. But you might be wondering, why don't we have a LTS or a long-term support, a version that gets maintained, at least for security fixes, for several years, even though it might not be under active development for new features or bug fixes. It's something that end users of PHP would think would be great, but the core maintainers kind of don't like that idea for several reasons. One is that maintaining 3 versions of PHP is kind of hard enough, having to backport all the new features and bug fixes and everything. And backporting those patches isn't always easy. In some cases, for example, if the implementation of a feature has changed significantly, that might mean that the patch that could be applicable to the most recent version can't really be applied to the old version because the code has been significantly refactored. So that means that the bug fix or security fix kind of has to be rewritten for those older versions again. It also gets to the point where, those older versions are maintained because a lot of people are using them, or are people using them because they're still maintained and they don't have to upgrade because the maintenance still exists. Also, the longer you put off an upgrade, the harder it becomes. If you wanted to try and upgrade a PHP 5.1 application to 8.3, it's going to be very difficult, but going from something like 8.1 to 8.3, not that difficult. Also, all our community of extensions and frameworks, etc. If we had a version of PHP that was supported for several years, it might mean that they would have to maintain compatibility with that old version as well as the new version, and that makes some of those design decisions in bringing the project forward much more difficult because you have to support so many older versions. If refactoring is a little bit out of the question, there are companies like Zend who can provide LTSs for older versions of PHP. You could yourself also find the patches and try and backport them into your own installation and sort of roll your own version of PHP with security updates. So if you're ready to go and look at PHP 8.3 now, the easiest way to do that would be to grab a Docker container, which has this all built into there. So depending on what platform you're on and what you're trying to look at, if you want to run an interactive console, boom, first one right there will give you a PHP shell that you can run your commands. If you instead just want to play around with one particular little file in there, which is what I did to generate several of these examples, you can just use a Docker run command to run that particular script and see what it looks like exactly in that version of PHP. If you're trying to test out your whole code base, it might be easier just to pull in the entire Docker image, like in a Docker compose file or something. And with that, the last slide is not advancing, so I will go ahead and open that up to any questions.
So how you said, how about some easy ones? So like, how does this compare to like the 8.2 and 8.1 or 8.0? Is it, you said it's not as big as the other ones?
I remember going from 5.6 to 7.0 had a lot more breaking changes than this.
What was your favorite feature from 8.3 that we're getting?
Which one did I list first? Because it would be that one.
Okay. Whatever one was on the slides.
Yep.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm saying
go ahead.
question of so when 8.3.0 comes out, at what point would you jump on that or wait for there to be like an 8.3.4 or something? There's really no good answer. a lot of those bug fixes of those early releases is going to be stuff coming from people out in the community running their code. You'll just have to give it a shot and see if it works for you. There's never any point where we're going to say that PHP is completely stable and bug free. Even the most recent version of 8.2, I'm sure there's going to be some bugs in there that will be found eventually.
So how does the pre-releases work? Like, if you're testing locally and you want to like get a head start on, seeing if it's going to work, you don't have to like compile? Is there like a different, how hard is it?
So if you're already running Dockerized, then it's not very difficult because you just change the version string in there, and then now you're on the 8.3 release candidate. If you pull in binaries another way, like if you use your OS's package manager to pull in the binaries, I don't believe any of them are putting the binaries up in their repos for the betas or the release candidates. So you'll have to wait until the full release for that. If you are able to then pull in the binary separately, I'm pretty sure that there are builds, like actual binary builds, available on the PHP site.
Cool. That sounds good. Appreciate you putting this together. Any other questions for Tim in the chat? Drop your questions now. I don't know if we does other organizers there on stage. Should we have a little get together here after the presentation? Turn on your cameras. Otherwise, I think we'll okay. So here we go. Let's bring on people. Oh, sorry. I'm not sure if we have a winner yet for the JetBrains stuff, but Chris typically here you go. Chris
We do.
We do. Okay. Awesome. Bobby's okay. Here we go. We're all here. Hello, everybody. Are we ready for Thanksgiving in like a week, 2 weeks?
Oh God, is it close?
God, Alina. Hello.
I'm getting ready. I'm going up to New York next week for a little Friendsgiving.
Nice.
We're releasing a pretty significant change in our system, and I'm finishing my basement right now, so Thanksgiving is like the last thing on my mind.
I'm still recovering from an awesome conference. It was great to see a few of you last week. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was like a mini organizer meeting. I think we had like 5 or something.
Was it Longhorn?
Yeah.
Would have liked to have gone to that, but yeah, too much going on.
Next year.
Yeah,
Same.
same.
Got a block up time for you.
The video should be showing up on YouTube, I think, at some point. Ian might have some more info on that, but if you have a virtual ticket, I don't know if the virtual ticket is still available, but if you bought a virtual ticket, you can go back and watch the videos from all the talks. So I know I have a list of things to get through this weekend.
Looks like we're still live and recording.
Yep. Yeah, we are on the YouTubes just hanging out for a bit.
You can also go to Joined In and get all of the, okay, not all of them, all the slides that and code samples that speakers posted to Joined In. So if you're interested in some of the things that were going on there, there are some good examples there of and things that you can go through besides just the videos as well. So.
And I know all of these speakers were excellent about linking their slides to the Joined In page, right?
Hey, I got mine linked.
So Ian says that if you have a ticket of any type for this year, you can access the Friday, Saturday recordings via the attendee portal.
Yeah, I've gone back and watched a couple that I missed from being other sessions.
But Ian, can we still buy a virtual ticket today if we didn't buy it before?
I'm sure Ian is happy to take your money. Venmo
So,
Ian.
Even the tutorial day on Thursday is on Joined In, and slides and samples are there. I went and slept in the afternoon after my tutorial, so I did not go to the second tutorial that I wanted to, but there are slides and code samples.
Yeah, thank you for coming to give the presentation and the tutorial. That was good. Oh, sorry. I thought we had a question. But yeah, it sounds like maybe you might speak next month.
Yeah, I'm happy to do stuff that I put together for the tutorial on browser testing. So
Awesome.
if anyone wants to prep for it, there's code samples on Joined In.
Have like a live tutorial like this kind of format.
Yep, like what's going on. So you'll be able to download all of the code, and then we'll step through all the things that are happening. And so hopefully get you up and running with being able to do your own browser testing and playing around with that. We'll talk about using both PHP browser and Selenium for actually testing a website. And then you can also tie in directly to a framework if you are using something like Symfony, which is what the sample app is on. You can tie into the framework, which will let you just do request response directly from the framework, and you don't even have to have it running on a server at all. It'll just connect to your code directly. So that makes it even faster. So we'll talk about the levels of testing that you can do, and there's some nice hacks that you can get to make it work quicker and easier for you. And then, of course, going all the way to doing some Gherkins style testing, because that is amazingly helpful. I couldn't believe how many times we were talking about at the conference the need to just communicate about a project in different ways. You know, you can't build something that you don't know what you're building. And so the Gherkins syntax is a pretty simple way to talk to anyone about the project and get your acceptance criteria modeled so that you make sure that you are actually building the thing that is requested anyway.
Is that part of BDD?
Yeah.
Nice.
So have you gotten your product owner to given you the whens and thens and ands in that syntax?
Yes. So some tips on that are let them tell you and just write it down, and then after the meeting go back and clean up the words. But yes, you can typically, it's easier if they don't have to feel like they have to give you the exact words to use, but they can do it in a when then, given when then. That's what they're looking for too. So just don't make them write it exactly, just talk about it in that format, and then you'll be able to go back and fix that up into a more usable given when then. But yes, it's even if you can start out by going, what I'm hearing you say is that given I have this type of user, or I'm logged in as this type of user, when I go to this page, then I see that, or I can do that. What happens if I'm logged in as this type of user and I go to that page? What will happen? And it helps everybody, I think, to talk about it a lot easier. And it's a pretty simple format that is not too hard to get other people on board with. So yeah, I think it works pretty well. It's a little, I was nervous myself about getting started with it because I was like, isn't this just like a lot more work? Don't I have to like write the test twice? And I already don't want to spend the time to write the test, right? Why would I want to write tests twice? But once you get it set up initially, it can actually be pretty simple to do a lot of the testing for it. So
Cool. Well, that sounds
the
good.
name of
We've
that?
got
What was the name of that site that has the slides again?
joined in. Join JOIND.IN.
Oh, that's what I was doing wrong.
That's okay. I got up at my presentation. I'm like, it's joined in something. Like I know the name. I don't know how you type this in the browser. I can't remember. It's been too long since I went to the site. I'm like, yeah, it was pretty silly.
Yeah, I knew about it, and I'd been there before because past conferences and stuff, people have used it, but I wasn't finding it for some reason.
Oh yes, I did that on stage. Don't worry.
missing the E. I think Ian maintained the site or helped maintain the site at some point. Everybody contributes.
A few of us talked about moving it to WordPress.
Oh no.
Blasphemy.
It's got a WordPress link in the footer. Oh, no, that's some other site.
That's to the blog for joined in.
Well, good presentation, Tim. Coming up on the hour here.
Thank you, Logan.
Yep.
Thanks a lot, Tim.
Yep.
Yeah, good job.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing. Hopefully it will be an easy upgrade for people and everybody can follow that path forward.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited because I'm actually working on one for my team right now. And I'm like, if I just delay this another week, then I can put it on 8.3.
Yeah.
Docker poll or something like that.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. I'm gonna end the stream and hope you all have a good Thanksgiving. And we will see you next month. Probably Alina will be speaking, so looking forward to that. Yep. Take care. Have a good evening.
See y'all.
Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
y'all.
Good night, everyone.